All right, kia ora and good evening, everyone. It's Nathan Rose from Cap Gemini here in beautiful Auckland, New Zealand. Welcome to a special edition of what I'm calling Casino Night on the Power Platform. We're going to take a look at my Rugby World Cup predictions, specifically through the lens of a random coin toss and some really weird stuff that's been going on. So we're going to really get geeky with the Rand and RandBetween expressions in Power Automate and Power FX. So if the thought of that makes you a bit weak in the knees, now's the time to stop the video. But for those of you who have worked with these expressions or possibly will be in the future, we're going to get hands-on, see how they work, and learn some things, see some things that I got wrong, and hopefully this will help you when you need to use them in a future project. So let me go ahead and share my screen and let's get into it. Now, some of you may have been following along with the AI predictions I've been making for the matches at the Rugby World Cup that's being played right now in France. And one of the elements that I added to my prediction engine this year is a coin toss, a random prediction to compare to the predictions coming from the AI sentiment analysis. Because if a coin toss is equally or more predictive than my AI predictions, I could be wasting my time as well as all of yours. So this is the accuracy rate of my coin toss. It's sitting at around 80%. Now, alarm bells should be ringing right now. Something really weird is going on. Now, let's get into it and see what's going on. Now, in my app for the World Cup, you can see my coin toss prediction here, as well as the home side and the away side. And I would expect to see somewhat of an even distribution between the home and the away side being picked to win the match. However, when we look through the data, we see that the home side is exclusively being picked to win the match. So again, even the most shady pit boss in Vegas would be casting a wary eye at this, going, come on, man, at least try to make it look legit. So something weird is going on. Now, let me show you how I initially constructed this coin toss and what I got wrong about it. So we'll come over here to Power Automate. And the way I initially created this was I said, okay, I need heads or tails. So if I get a random number, either 1 or 2, 1 being heads, 2 being tails, that should give me a coin toss. And I did this in Power Automate because Power Automate is doing the heavy lifting in my app to generate the predictions. So it wasn't too much extra effort to just add in a compose action for the coin toss. So this is how the coin toss was working for the pool rounds that generated most of the data in that slide I just showed you. So I said, give me a random number between 1 and 2, 1 being heads, 2 being tails. So let's go ahead and flip this coin 10 times and watch this thing in action. So we'll go ahead and run this flow. All right, the flow's run. Now look at this. We have 10 heads and 0 tails. Something really weird is going on. So I dug into the Microsoft Docs. Now here's what's actually happening. The RAND expression in Power Automate uses the bottom number is inclusive. So 1 is included, but the top number is not. So if you say, give me a random number between 1 and 2, it's only ever going to give you 1s. Now that is in the Microsoft Docs. Unfortunately, reading instructions is not one of my strengths. So that's something that I've learned the hard way. So if I have a rand expression saying, we'll come over here to another flow that I've created, saying, give me a random number between 1 and 3, I will get 1 or 2, but I won't get 3. Now, this is distinctly different from the RandBetween function that you may be familiar with in Power FX and Canvas apps and low-code plugins, because RandBetween is inclusive of both those numbers. Rand is not. And in Power Automate, you only have Rand available to you. So when I go ahead and flip this coin 10 times, and again, I'm generating a random number between 1 and 3, I'm expecting to see a little bit more of an even distribution between heads and tails. Again, 1 being heads, 2 being tails. Let's see how we did. So let's go ahead and run this flow. All right, the flows run, and let's see how we did. And we got 5 heads and 5 tails. So we got an even distribution. That's about what we'd expect to see. So that's the first mistake that I made in my coin toss. This idea that basically I got the expression wrong in Power Automate. I failed to understand what that RAND expression is actually doing. So again, if you are using the RAND expression, the top number that you put in is not included. So if you say, give me a random number between 1 and 2, you will only ever get ones. If you say, give me a random number between 1 and 3, you will get 1 and 2. If you say, give me a random number between 1 and 10, you will get 1 through 9. So that's how that expression works. Really crucial to understand that. Now, in terms of, however, when we come back to our match data, I did update the methodology, and I'll get into that in a second, for the quarterfinal matches, which were played this past weekend. However, what I noticed is that I'm still getting, for these 4 quarterfinal matches, I'm still seeing the home side predicted. So let's get into that. Now, let me show you what I've done in terms of my coin toss for the knockout rounds. Now, my initial hypothesis was that maybe I just needed more numbers than, say, a 1 or a 2 to get heads or tails. And so what I did was I've created a more complex expression. Here, let me pop this into a notepad so it's a little easier to see. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm basically saying, give me a random number between 1 and, I think that's 100 million. I'm running out of zeros, but give me a random number between 1 and 10 million, 100 million, and then I need to determine if it's odd or even. If it's odd, it's heads. If it's even, it's tails. Now, the way you do that is there's a cool expression in both Power FX and Power Automate called mod. And quick shout out to Nate Chamberlain, who has an awesome blog on this. I'll drop a link in the comments of this video, where he shows you how to do exactly this and get an odd or an even number using this mod expression. Mod basically looks at the remainder. So I basically say, give me a random number between 1 and 100 million, divide it by 2. If there's a remainder, it's odd, and if there isn't, that's an even number. So I've got a larger pool of numbers to play with, which should give me something more of a representative distribution, something a little bit more even between heads and tails. And generally speaking, it worked. So I ran this 100 times, 500 times, 1,000 times, and I had a relatively even distribution. It wasn't 50-50 like in that example that we just saw with the random number between 1 and 3, but it was, kind of 60-40. So something similar, representative of what you'd expect to see in real life if you were actually flipping a coin. But again, when we come back to our matches here, we still see the home side being predicted, including for the upcoming semifinal matches that are going to be played over this coming weekend. So let's see what's going on. So let's run this 4 times to simulate the quarterfinals to see what could possibly be going on. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, and our flow is run. Now look at this. Now this time it gave me an even distribution. However, as I saw in the app, it didn't. And if we go and test this another time, let's see if it doesn't see if it gives us something a little bit different. Okay, so this time we got 4 heads and 0 tails, about what we got, what the same results that we got in the app over the weekend. So what's going on here? I'm going to get really geeky for a second. I suspect what we're seeing is basically an inverse of the law of large numbers. Now, the law of large numbers states that with a large enough set of data, things are going to revert to the mean. So with something like a coin toss, you would expect if you flip a coin, you're going to have a relatively even distribution between heads and tails. And if you do that 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 1,000,000 times, you're going to see that kind of distribution. But if you flip a coin 2, 3, 4 times, it is possible to get heads or tails 4 times in a row, which is what we're seeing here. So that's what I think is going on with this coin toss and why it seems to be coming up heads every single time. Now, in terms of getting it to terms of simulating something that's a little bit more accurate to real life, what I would probably have to do in the flow would be, again, loop through this, say, do this say like 1,000 times, and then whichever is greater, heads or tails, pick that one. That would probably be the best way to get what would truly be a random coin toss. The downside with that is you're looping. And so again, in Power Automate, you do have to be somewhat conscientious of the number of API calls that you're making. And so you don't want to do needless looping. So if any of you have any ideas of how you might do this without looping, I'd love to hear it, but I think that's probably how you'd have to do it to get probably the most random coin flip that you possibly can. So that's Rand and how it works in Power Automate. Now, I did construct a version of this coin toss in a low-code plugin just to see how it performs. So I've created a instant plugin here in the Dataverse Accelerator app. This is not bound to a table. It's a global plugin. And I am using so again, we've got the mod expression in PowerFX, same as in Power Automate. However, the expression is slightly different. Rand between in PowerFX is inclusive, so it will give me 1 all the way through 10 million. It does, as opposed to Rand, which will give me between 1 and 9,999,000, so on and so forth. So that's the key difference between these expressions, and why it is easy to get confused when you are flicking between PowerFX and Power Automate and using these expressions. So let's go ahead and test this and see how it works. So let's go ahead and run the plugin. The plugin's running, and we got heads. Let's go ahead and run it again. We got tails. Run it again. Heads. Heads. So this seems to be giving me a similar effect as well. So something that I might actually try in the knockout in the remaining knockout matches is generating a coin toss with a plugin and comparing that to what's coming out in Power Automate, just to see if we get some variance there. So to sum up things, in terms of using these Rand expressions, you need to be very, very, very conscious of what they're doing. So Rand between in PowerFX is inclusive. So if I say give me a random number between 1 and 10, it will include 10 in that array of random numbers it can give me. Whereas if I use Rand, it will only give me a random number between 1 and 9. And so I hope that makes things a little bit easier for you to understand. That's what's going on with my coin flip in my Rugby World Cup prediction app, and some stuff that I'm still trying to figure out and get something that is a little bit more random, a little bit more representative of a random coin toss. So I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.